Gunmen ambush and shoot dead 7 aid workers, including a doctor, in Pakistan. It follows the killing of 9 others involved in vaccinating villagers against polio. How has public health become a battlefield in the West's war on terror? Well, hello and welcome to The World This Week with me, Phil Rees. I hope you had a happy holiday season. Well, no one has claimed responsibility for these week's awful killings, but the fingers are pointing at the Taliban. They've argued that until the US stops its drone strikes, they will not permit the vaccination scheme in areas under their control. Well, the politics of aid will be the focus of our first discussion this week. And in part 2, we stay with the conflict in Afghanistan. The Western-backed government in Kabul is now starting peace talks with the Taliban. But as the violence increases, what's the chance of peace when foreign armies go home in less than 2 years' time? That's in about half an hour. Now, Pakistan is one of only 3 countries in the world where polio remains endemic, and the others are neighbouring Afghanistan and Nigeria. The United Nations has suspended its polio vaccination programme in parts of Pakistan as a result of the shootings. Now, the most recent came in Swabi district, which is only about 45 miles northwest of the capital, Islamabad. Charlotte Hawkins has more.
6 female Pakistani aid workers and a male doctor were shot dead in their car on Tuesday as they returned home from work at a children's community centre. They worked for local agency Support with Working Solutions, which runs a vaccination programme. The driver was also injured. The attack is assumed to be linked to shootings of polio vaccinators last month, which left 9 people dead. The youngest was 17 years old. The shootings have been widely condemned across Pakistan, particularly by the government.
पोलियो वर्कर्स जो हैं वो हमारे बच्चों को पोलियो से बचाने के लिए उनको कतरे पिलाने जा रहे हैं। क्या उनको भी गोलियों से छलनी कर दिया जाए? कौन सा माशरा, कौन सा मजहब इसकी इजाजत देता है?
The Taliban have repeatedly threatened health workers involved in the vaccination campaign. Some workers said they received calls just before the attacks telling them to stop working with infidels. However, the Taliban have denied responsibility for the shootings. Unease about vaccines is widespread among the Pakistani population, in part due to a rumour that immunisations are part of a Western conspiracy to sterilise Muslims. Concerns were further fuelled in July 2011 when it was revealed that the CIA carried out a fake vaccination programme in order to obtain DNA, which led to the assassination of Osama bin Laden. So there is some public opposition to vaccines, but there may also have been another, more strategic political motive behind the attacks.
पोलियो चूँकि एक इंटरनेशनल मसला है, सारी दुनिया में इसके लिए ये कतरे दिए जा रहे हैं और इस हवाले से जो डिसीजन हुआ है कि जिस मुल्क में ये कतरे न पिलाए जाएं तो उस मुल्क को न तो बाहर दुनिया से ताल्लुक़ रखने के लिए बाहर छोड़ा जाएगा और न उस मुल्क में बाहर से लोग आएंगे, यानी दुनिया से सोशली कट जाएगा। तो ये एक ऐसी साजिश है कि एक गनौनी साजिश है, गहरी साजिश है कि पाकिस्तान को जो है आइसोलेशन में लिया जो है वो कर दिया जाए।
The killings have caught the government off guard, which said it hadn't expected attacks in areas far from Taliban strongholds and that they would have to change tactics in the health campaign. The aim is to deliver the polio vaccine to 33 million children, but the UN and other Pakistani groups have now partly suspended their vaccination programs out of fear for their staff. Yet the UN does remain optimistic.
As long as we're talking about that key issue of protecting children from lifelong paralysis, we've always been able to find common purpose, common ground with populations.
Nevertheless, Pakistanis are angry that due to these attacks and consequent suspension of vaccinations, millions of Pakistani children remain at risk of catching the highly infectious polio disease, which can cause permanent paralysis within hours. Charlotte Hawkins, Islam Channel.
Oh, thank you, Charlotte, for that. Well, I'm pleased to have in the studio Zahid Akbar, a human rights lawyer and supporter of the incumbent Pakistan People's Party. We also have Asim Khan, the former London president of Tehreek-e-Insaf. That's the Pakistani political party led by the former cricketer Imran Khan. And finally, on the phone, we have Dr. Heidi Larson, a senior lecturer at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She also leads the Vaccine Confidence Project research group there. Dr. Larson, can we start with you? I mean, how important is this polio vaccination program for the health of young people in that region?
Well, I think the issue with polio right now is a historical and long-term issue where it's very important in the sense that it's extremely close to eradication. The program did extremely well over the last year and was down to under 100 cases. So this has been a bit of a blow, to say the least, for the program, just because it's very close and it risks allowing for the spread of polio again.
Because it's very easy to actually prevent polio, is that right? And the vaccination is very simple.
The vaccination is very simple. It's one of the cheaper, affordable vaccines. It's not an injection; it's a drop. So it's pretty straightforward, and they've rounded up volunteers all over the world to be trained and administer it. So yes, it's pretty straightforward. We shouldn't have to have polio in the world anymore.
Okay, well, listen, thank you for that. Zahid Akbar, I mean, as we heard there from Dr. Larson, I mean, we heard in Charlotte Hawkins' video there, the UN members saying that, when it comes to basically preventing long-term paralysis in children, isn't it ridiculous that we're in this situation?
Well, certainly it is. But we have to see that the background which has built up over the few months, well, not few months, but about a year or so, has been that there has been suspicion against the polio health workers, and that is what has led to the shootings. What is different here, that in Nigeria and Afghanistan there has been opposition to the polio vaccination, however there hasn't been any violence. So that is markedly different what has happened in Pakistan.
I mean, is there any truth in these suspicions? So, I mean, there is a conspiracy to, to sterilize people in the region. I mean, well, do you think there is?
I read somewhere that there has been statements which say that men will become less manly and the woman will become more bashful. Now, my question to myself was that if that is really true, then why it hasn't happened in Saudi Arabia, which has used the same vaccination and has completely eradicated the disease?
And it
So I
hasn't
don't
done
find
that
that
to Saudi
credible
men, you think, yeah.
at all.
Well, Asim Khan, I mean, obviously what the CIA did in terms of using a bogus program that is vaccination program, to basically get the DNA of bin Laden in order to facilitate his assassination. That was a serious problem, wasn't it? The consequences of it are now being felt.
I think, Phil, that's as always the case, basically, that what's happening in Pakistan in an already volatile situation for the last 10, 12 years, and certainly when the local communities are to find out that all these NGOs or the vaccination programs are fake and obviously being funded by CIA. So obviously that leaves a big gap on the trust side. And obviously that has not helped by the fact that the government of Pakistan has not actually, because they've only contributed towards like 2.2% of the budget towards the health. And then there's not much awareness campaigns within the community. The fact is that when the UN related program has such an important, polio should have been eradicated from Pakistan by year 2000. And yet we are in 2013. We're still talking about it. So there has to be a sense of real community involvement where the teachers, the doctors at the community level get engaged, and then the whole program basically kicks off. You cannot actually stop that because obviously the lives of the children are at risk, but the protection mechanism has to be established as well. But at the same time, you also have to take into consideration as well that there is so much volatility around. The political situation has not helped either. I mean, for the wars over the years, and the governance, the total breakdown in the governance is literally left people who to trust. I mean, neither they can trust the government, neither they can trust the local politicians, and now obviously the fear is this, that they will be actually going after the UN related projects as well. So there has to be a real sense of basically comfort as well, that somebody has to actually take charge and take control. And obviously government has to play their part as well in that. But the important message from the Pakistan is that these campaigns cannot be stopped. UN must carry on, and this polio has to be eradicated.
But, in a sense, I mean, the Taliban, though, in their suspicion about the UN, the world community, if you get that, is legitimate, because, they faced a global invasion of their country, and the UN was backing that, and UN agencies have been backing that. So, I mean, in a way, they have an argument, don't they? How can the UN claim to be an equal broker and doing something that is politically, as it were, anodyne like this, when it is part of, the global sort of operation in Afghanistan?
I mean, that's what basically goes back to the same argument, Phil, that over the years, I mean, 30 years or 35 years of a mayhem in Afghanistan and its destabilization in Pakistan, at least in the northern side and all over Pakistan, everything is interrelated. That has basically contributed towards having that notion of mistrust on organizations like UN, World Health Organization, and all the rest as well, and Taliban's and all the other players basically working in Afghanistan as well. It's everybody has to come onto the table and really define what they really want to do. And the thing is this, the world in itself, the UN, the Americans, and all the other sort of partners as well, they really have to decide as well that Afghanistan has to be rebuilt. I remember 10 years ago when they invaded Afghanistan for the third time under the disguise of the Osama bin Ladens and everything. Tony Blair was here saying basically, well, we will rebuild Afghanistan, we will rebuild the infrastructure. Nothing of that happened. And if you do not do that, then obviously you create the vacuum.
Well, we'll be obviously having a whole program today looking at Afghanistan, discussing some of that later. But I mean, just going back to, in a way, the CIA, as it were, attempts to get at Osama bin Laden. I mean, Dr. Larson, did you find in your work on the ground, reports you've had from the ground, that CIA operation has had a serious effect on your work? Hello, Dr. Larson?
Yes. Well, I think it has been a contributing factor. As the other panel members have said, it's a complex mix of factors that have come together, and it certainly it didn't help with the choice of using a vaccination program in light of what was going on with polio, but in the situation in general. And as the other previous panel member also said, this is a very difficult situation. I've also been asked, Dr. Larson, could we do days of tranquility like we've done in other parts of the world? But the nature of conflict is a very different one, and I think we have to rethink, health and health programs in situations that are very high risk, and one, not contribute to making them more risky, but two, how do we work in high-risk situations. And the other factor in here is that makes it complex from a health side is that there is no Ministry of Health in Pakistan. They've devolved to a local level, and it's made it more complex in terms of managing the process.
Do you think there's a fundamental problem, though, in terms of aid agencies not appearing neutral when it comes to Islamist groups? And if you look at what's happening in Somalia, you've seen similar kind of things in different parts of the world, that somehow Western aid agencies are not able to simply do their job because they are suspected of being partisan. I mean, is that a real problem now, and how should that be addressed?
Well, I mean, the recent killings were actually a local NGO. So it's I think some of it's what represents this is also compounded by issues around against women working, against education. So it's a complex factor. I do agree. I absolutely agree that efforts like this need to be locally owned, absolutely locally owned. And what was interesting after the killing of the 9 polio workers, some of the news went out that the UN was stopping polio, and there was follow-up news from Pakistan government saying the UN has stopped, but we're not stopping. So it was an interesting sense of ownership. It was a government commitment, but it was also a statement trying to distinguish that the UN is supporting this effort, but it is a Pakistan-owned initiative.
Sure, quite important. I mean, yes.
I think picking up from Dr. Larson's point as well, that it is obviously, that's what I was saying, that it's a complex situation. But I think what, in high-risk situations, what we need to do is that, or whether it's the local NGOs that are getting involved on the ground, there really has to be a very comprehensive program for them as well to realize the dangers as well. And once the symptoms do appear, whether the threats are happening, whether they're getting phone calls, what is the most speedy process for them to actually get to the highest platform so these things can be averted as well. So these things start to stop. You cannot have one standardized approach, for instance, I mean, for Nigeria or in Afghanistan, because it's a high-risk situation, and for that, you really need to develop a strategy around it. That if people are being threatened, local NGOs are being threatened, how do you get involved? You actually inform the local, the people in the mosques as well, people in the teachers as well. If that network is strong, then obviously the risk of this will be minimized.
Well, I mean, Zahid Akbar, I mean, obviously, you know, the Taliban can easily be accused, and if they were responsible for this, of course, playing politics with polio and with children's futures. But equally well, they said that if the drone attacks are stopped, that is US drone attacks on your land, on the land of Pakistan, are stopped, then they would actually allow these things to continue. Now, your government, of course, is doing nothing to stop that.
To stop the drone attacks? Well, the government of Pakistan has a very clear stand that the drone attacks are against the national sovereignty of Pakistan.
Yeah, but it's not doing anything,
they
is
haven't
it?
done anything.
Now, in terms of doing, I mean, yes, you can say that we should shoot down the drones, but we have to look at the political and visional consequences of any action that we take. Now, may I say that linking everything with drones is not going to lead us anywhere. We are not stopping eating and drinking just because there are drones falling.
Well, those
So
people are
same,
being killed, I'm afraid.
Well,
they really are.
So we are
in
going in a situation where we have children being killed by drones, and then we are leaving the rest of them to be killed by polio. Is that what we are doing? I think all political parties of Pakistan, the government, which has already done, army, health workers, they all have to say one thing, that no ifs and no buts, but what is being done to the polio and against the polio vaccination program is totally unacceptable. Unconditionally, we have to continue this.
Do you think that there's a problem in Pakistan at the prevalence of conspiracy theories? Do you think that that's something that your government could do something about?
Absolutely. I just heard that there was the vaccination program, the ruse, which led to the killing of Osama bin Laden. Now, that was not, according to New York Times, was not a polio vaccination program. So as the other guest speaker has explained, that this is not an injection-based vaccination program, it's a drop-based. And you cannot get DNA simply by administrating drops. In terms of general Pakistani population, people are aware of this, and there hasn't been any resistance in the recent years to the polio drops. Now, what we see here is total, I mean, it is very obvious that it is a propaganda, a political propaganda against a health issue, linking it back to something which shouldn't have happened at the first place. I'm talking about the CIA ruse vaccination program. But we cannot link everything with drones.
Well, I mean, Heidi Larson, I mean, just bring you in again, if I could, on this. I mean, do you believe that, you know, this kind of conspiracy theory has so much traction in Pakistan? And obviously the country's got a history of unsolved murders and rumours and stuff for many generations now. But do you think this is a particular problem that you've had to face?
Oh, conspiracy is certainly a problem. It's also been an issue in northern Nigeria in the polio campaign, but it's not just unique to polio. I mean, exactly. I just read a report this past week from iodine deficiency report in Pakistan. 30% of Pakistan citizens will not take salt with iodine because they suspect that iodine is linked with infertility. So it's not, I mean, I think, again, we have to, there's multiple things going on here, and there is a lot of conspiracy, and that my concern about conspiracy is difficult to put the fires out on. We do a lot of research on rumors and conspiracies related to health at the London School, and it's a difficult one, but it can be dealt with. But it's not the kind of thing that a government can address. I think that would only fuel the fires of conspiracy, because a lot of the conspiracies are, against the government or against foreigners. It needs to be very locally addressed.
But it is a problem. I mean, Asim Khan, in a way, conspiracy theories are often the product of a country that feels it doesn't control its own destiny. And, where is it? There are the political leaders have been murdered in recent years. Several have been killed without, and prominent people. I mean, indeed, many Pakistanis don't believe Osama bin Laden was actually there. I mean, there are so many parts of Pakistani life where it's hard to be sure about anything, isn't it?
I think, Phil, conspiracies and rumors, you cannot actually negate. It exists within every society in different forms and shapes. In Pakistan, yes. Basically, what happens is conspiracy only would exist if there is an inability, whether at the governance level, whether within the society in itself as well, whether the people are not taking the civic responsibilities and ownership as well, and also the rest of the institutions as well.
Well,
so
yeah,
when
but there are, come on,
yes.
General Zia al-Haq, okay, your leader, Benazir Bhutto, okay,
I totally agree.
Abdullah Azam in 1989, the leader of the Jihad. I mean, who killed these people?
And obviously, when you ask these questions, who actually killed them, you actually look at the benefit that came afterwards. So obviously, if Zia was killed, Benazir was killed, who actually benefited from that? And who were the people behind that? Sometimes, obviously, it's never been clear to establish that whether there's been any judicial inquiries as well for that, whether there has been any police investigation. Benazir was shot, and within literally an hour.
But this is linked, isn't it, to the people who believe that iodine, as we heard from Dr. Larson, might be affecting...
All the traces were removed. And who actually removed those traces? I mean, the whole crime scene was basically, it was washed away.
This is Benazir Bhutto's crime scene.
Exactly, it was washed away. Who did that? And whose instructions? Obviously, it was not me. So obviously, the people close to her, or the people who wanted her dead, or people who actually wanted to benefit from her death, I mean, these are the people you have to look at. And
I mean, Zahid Akbar, I mean, it's a sad portrait we're painting, obviously, of a fine nation here, Pakistan, though, one that can't even, distribute polio vaccinations. I mean, surely, bearing in mind what we've heard about this kind of stuff, you need a more clear form of government. There needs to be radical changes coming up, and I know elections are coming up in April.
Certainly, but it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be an easy say to demand more from the government only. We have to say that it is Pakistan, not just of the government, but of the people, of all the political parties. When it comes to criticizing the government, our voices are as high as they could be. But when it comes to condemning the attacks on polio, the attack on Malala Yousafzai, some sections of the society are not as loud as they should be, or they have been when they speak against the government.
Well, the government should be loud enough.
I must say that the people of Pakistan have worked towards this, and they are fully aware and committed.
Well, I tell you, we're coming to an end there, okay? But they will have a chance, of course, will have a chance to vote in elections coming up. I believe in April. I'm sure you'd like them to bring change, perhaps reform or change, whatever happens to be their choice. But we're coming to a short break. In part two, it's the war that most people want to forget, certainly in Britain, but almost 100,000 foreign troops, including over 9,000 from the UK, are still in Afghanistan. All are due to leave within 2 years, but what will they leave behind? More in a few minutes. Stay with us.